Welcome, writers. My name is Rebecca Pickens. I'm a certified book coach and developmental editor. I'm also host of Self Editing Essentials, a group coaching program for fiction and memoir writers who have a manuscript that's finished or almost finished, and they're ready to learn the art of self editing. If you'd like to learn more about the services that I provide for writers, you can check out my links in the comments section below. So every week, I love answering questions that come to me from my newsletter subscribers, from clients, from the comments section below. So if you should have a question about publishing, writing, editing, stick it in the comments section anytime, and I will try to answer it. This week, I'm answering a question from Allison. Allison is a writer that I worked with. She's writing a a novel, and she asked a terrific question about comp titles. She wants to know, what are they? Why do writers need them? And how do I find them? And this is a question that people come and ask about all of the time. If you are planning to publish your book traditionally, then you've probably heard that this is necessary if you're going to pitch to literary agents. What some people don't realize is even if you're self-publishing, having good comp titles can be really beneficial. So we're going to look at why comp titles are really a fantastic tool for all kinds of writers. So let's just start by defining comp titles. What are they? Comps, which is short for comparative titles, are simply books that are similar to your work in terms of genre, theme, writing style, and also the target audience for which the book is intended. And these comps are used typically in traditional marketing to show where your book might fit in the marketplace. So you can think about it in really simple terms. If you have a friend who loves Louise Penny and she's looking for someone else to read, you may start thinking about that and say, okay, she likes Louise Penny. These are the things that people who read Louise Penny all have in common. I know the perfect book for her. When we do that for a friend, we are essentially choosing comp titles. There are a few more rules that apply when we're doing that for a literary agent or for market research that don't apply for when we're looking for books for friends, but you get the gist. It's similar. So why do comp titles matter so much? Strong comp titles help an agent understand your book's marketplace potential. So you may have heard that finding a literary agent can sometimes feel more difficult than writing the book. Some people have even said it's more difficult than finding your publisher. And that's because the stakes are very high for your literary agent. They need to know that they can sell your book. So I've talked to so many agents who who've had to deal with situations where they fall in love with a story and they would buy the story themselves and put it on their bookshelf because they just love it so much. But they know that the market is not right for that book right now. And when that happens, no matter how much they love the story, it's hard for them to champion it because they're not going to be able to sell it to a publisher. For the publisher, the bottom line is they need to have a market for your book. And so, if you can find comp titles that suggest that indeed there are buyers for your book, you will be in a much better position to pitch to agents and to give them something they can pitch to publishers. So, from that perspective, comps are very, very important to agents. Now, self-published authors can also use comps to develop their own marketing strategy. You can use your comps to research who's buying books like yours and what is the income potential. It gives you a way to really create kind of realistic economic targets. It can improve your visibility because you will have a better idea of what kind of keywords to use, what kind of categories to put your book into if you decide to promote on Goodreads or Amazon. Being able to look at other books that are similar to yours and getting a sense of how those books were positioned in the marketplace will give you some great ideas for how to position your story strategically. And finally, titles really help us target our readers. It helps us understand who is likely to pick up this book. And when we have that understanding, we know how we have a better idea of how to find that reader. Where do they hang out? Where do they get their book blurbs and make decisions on what book they want to read next? We want to find those places, and comp titles can very much help you do so. So this is the big question. How do we choose comp titles? And people come to me often. Sometimes people even hire me to find their comp titles because they get very overwhelmed by this task. And admittedly, it can be a little daunting, but there are some techniques that can make it a lot easier. And I am assuming that a lot of you are writing in genres that you also enjoy reading. And if that's the case, you're an expert already. You probably have a pretty good idea of what you like, of who also likes those stories, and where people are going to find them. So lean in on that expertise that you already have. And I always tell my writers to start by browsing their own bookshelves. What have they read that maybe they used as a mentor text, or maybe inspired them, made them know that this was a viable genre? Find those books, look them over, see if they're appropriate candidates to be your comp titles. It's also a great idea to go to the library and peruse those bookshelves and talk to librarians. Come prepared to give them a synopsis of your story and see if they have some good titles to check out. Next, you can use online book databases. So Amazon, whether you buy your books from Amazon or not, is a different question. You can just use them as a very powerful database to search for titles that are similar to your own. You can use Goodreads database as well. Their collections are just pretty much, it's in there. Any recent book is going to be in those databases, so they can be a great place to use, just like you would use any search engine. If you are trying to get published and you really want to understand the industry, I always encourage writers to subscribe to author newsletters and industry newsletters, read book reviews, really get a sense of what's happening in the industry. And newsletters are a great way to do that. And in doing so, you'll soon have a very good sense of what is hot in publishing right now, what is coming out, what is selling, what is not. And that can be very helpful in helping you decide how you want to pitch your book to your agent. So, to back up for a second, I am in no way suggesting you should write toward trends. This never works. It never feels very good. Write what's in your imagination, write what you are inspired and moved to write, because that will always be your best story. But once you have that story, having a sense of the landscape out there, the publishing landscape, can be very helpful. And you can do that by looking at publications like the ones I've mentioned. Using ChatGPT can be surprisingly helpful. If you go in and you ask some really simple questions using the criteria that we're discussing today, that we'll actually be discussing in a minute, about what makes a good comp title. So, for example, a recent title, you would want to include your story's genre, your story, maybe if you're writing for YA or middle grade, you would want to make mention of that, and ask ChatGPT to come up with some titles for you. I would also caution you to read those books and make sure that indeed they are appropriate matches. But I have seen ChatGPT do a very good job with this task, and I've also seen it do a pretty awful job of it. So it's a starting point, it's not the finish line. Publishers Marketplace, you can read this online, and this is the place to go to get all the publishing buzz, what's coming out next month. It gives you a very good sense of the market and what is selling right now. And finally, in thinking about all of this, sometimes writers get really discouraged. They feel like, oh, there's not another book like mine, and I'll never be able to find a comp title. And I always I guess I always stop and ask the author, is that really true? There may not be a book with the specific plot points that you're your story addresses. But the themes and the audience that a writer is writing for has been done before. The trick is being able to recognize themes in your story and themes in another story that, while packaged a bit differently, are speaking to the same kind of people, to the same kinds of ideas. We use two comp titles in most query letters because you may have one book that represents very well magical realism that may be in your story. And then we may use another comp title to talk about the fact that your book is a family drama, a family saga. And so those two comp titles together with the magical realism and the family drama come together and resemble something like your story. So that is a way to get around that when you feel like you're not finding titles that really resonate and really remind you of your own. Um, and also be considering your audience. That the audience that your book and your comp title is intended for should be the same people. When looking for comp titles, I see the same potential pitfalls. Pretty much, it's pretty much the three that I have here on the screen. Avoid using overly famous or unrelated titles. So, although you may be writing a book about a young boy who's a wizard, it's it's very important not to use a title as enormous and successful as Harry Potter. It's just highly unlikely that there will be another Harry Potter in our generation. That is unique. That was a kind of a miracle in the publishing world. And when we equate our own books to a title that's been so phenomenally successful, it can it can strike the agent as a little delusional, a little unprofessional. We want to go for something a little bit more modest. And hey, if you are the next big thing, that's great. And it's always possible. But we don't want to assume that in a query letter. So avoid using overly famous number one bestseller, Stephen King, epic stories like that. But likewise, it's a balancing act. You don't want to find something that's too obscure either. So finding that middle ground where you are proving that your book has an audience, that it will find its place on the shelves in bookstores and do all right is important, but also showing that you have a realistic understanding of the industry is also equally important. And finally, choose current titles. Sometimes writers come to me and they found the best comp title. It's perfect. I completely understand why they've chosen it. But the problem is that the book is maybe 10 years old. And remember, the literary agent is making a case using these comp titles. They're making a case to the publisher. This book has an audience right now. This book is topical. This book is relevant. This book is contemporary. There are readers right now chomping at the bit to get more books like this into their hands. And we can prove that with these titles that have done quite well this year. So I usually recommend, if you can find a book that's 3 years old or less, that's optimal. Going on up to 5 is okay if you must, but beyond that, I would highly discourage you from doing so. And then how do these comps actually get used once you have them? Well, the most common way, what most people are thinking of when they're thinking about finding comp titles is, like we've said, query letters and also proposals, which come after query letters. So I have an example here of a query letter just to show you how you can slip those titles in a way that is informative, instructive, and also seamless, and doesn't feel out of place. So this is a generic letter to an agent. The first paragraph is your chance to introduce the name of your book, the genre, the word count, and a little blurb about why you chose that agent. Now, you can make this paragraph sparkle a lot more than this example does. This is pretty generic because we're not here to talk about that right now, but this gives you a sense of what what your first paragraph is there to do. It's basically to introduce your book. Your second paragraph is a perfect place to introduce your comp titles, because your comp titles, another purpose they serve is they are a shortcut. Your literary agents do not have time to read every single book that writers are pitching, right? It's rare that they will request pages to read, and they're using your query letter to decide if there is a reason for them to continue reading, to request pages. And so in getting your comp titles up there right at the front, right out of the gate, they are able to save some time. If that comp title looks like something they would represent, if it looks like something that resonates for them, that they think they could sell, they'll continue reading your letter, and hopefully they will also ask for pages of your manuscript. If you've put a comp title that suggests that you write horror and they like representing literary fiction, they know that you're not a match, and you've just saved them some time. So pick your literary agents carefully, make sure that your work is something that they represent, but the comp titles that you choose will indicate to them that you've done your homework and that you know the kind of books that they represent. So getting it up there in the second paragraph is optimal. And here you can see, you start with the book title. This is, again, generic. You can put your own special sauce on this, but this gives you an idea of how it can be done. You've got your book title, a brief description of the plot, and then here we have that will appeal to fans of, and here's your first comp title by author's name. And then we have your second comp title and the author's name. You can do up to 3 comp titles if you feel moved to do so. Sometimes you can't quite bring in all the elements that you need to with just the 2 titles. And if you want to do a third, that's okay. But 2 should be enough in most instances. Then we have a little bit more about your book. And finally, in the third paragraph, we come back to that comp title. Much like comp title, my story explains themes of X, Y, and Z. And you can see how we've sprinkled the reference to the comp title throughout that paragraph. So that is an example of how you would use these titles. Finally, the other way that you can use these comp titles is for marketing and promotion of your own book. So you can, when you have figured out other titles that are similar to your own, look and see, read about that author. Where are they showing up? Are they doing podcast interviews? Are they going to bookstores? Do they have their own website? What kind of readerly cultivation are they doing? Do they have a newsletter? Kind of studying how that writer is getting their book out into the hands of readers and finding those particular readers. Because if they're a good comp title, the people they're selling to are likely people who would be drawn to your story as well. And so really understanding how they are marketing their story is going to give you these great ideas to market your own. So I encourage you all to write comps, to find your comp titles, because I think that it is a very helpful tool to have. It's a great exercise to go through, and it will also really help you learn more about your story and understand better who it is that's going to respond to your story and buy your story and enjoy your story. So thank you so much. Happy writing. I will see you again soon, I hope.